Siddiqui, and this is indeed an auspicious occasion today as we gather in this hallowed hall of this department to commemorate 100 glorious years today. This occasion becomes special as we are joined by some of our senior and retired professors. Thank you, dear professors, for joining us today. And we are blessed to have with us Professor Michell, the great grandnephew of the founding head of the department, Professor S.G. Garg, under whose able auspices the tradition that we are proudly continuing today was first started. This Indo-Seismic architecture that houses this department are together like body and soul and are truest representative of this Oxford of the East. I would like to request Professor Sanjoy Datta Roy, Head of the Department of English, to welcome our esteemed guest. So please come to the podium.
Thank you, sir. That is pleasure as well as a privilege to be speaking from here today. And it's sheer coincidence that the period of my headship coincided with the centenary year of the department. Right? And it's also a coincidence that Professor Michell decided to come during this period. So I would like to express my gratitude to him for accepting the invitation and coming here on his own stage. Because I was disappointed with the university because the university unfortunately did not sort of pay for his travel also. It's a very sad situation. But then, doesn't matter, he's here. And we are celebrating the centenary with his presence here. He, of course, as Sadaf said, is the grandnephew of Professor S.G. Garg. And I also happened to get the S.G. Garg gold medal in the year 1978. I think Neelam is here. Neelam is also a recipient of the S.G. Garg gold medal. I'm sure there must be others as well. I'm not, I might not be recollecting right now, but I'm sure they are, right? So, he is a professor in the Center for Caribbean Studies, University of Oregon. And today, of course, he will be speaking about his granduncle, S.G. Garg. And yesterday, when I met him and he showed me some of the things that he has with him, it's fascinating, and all of you will go down memory lane. When you see the pictures and the narrative, is a great, great storyteller, as you will see as he talks to you, right? So I think I will not take any more time. Of course, before I stop, I would like to say that I'm so happy that so many of our teachers who taught me when I was a student here and who have even met Professor S.G. Garg when he came here in the year 1946. I think Professor Michell is here. Oh, you did? Is that 57? Okay, right. So, Professor H.S. Saxena, I think, met him when he was here, right? So, after Professor Michael's talk, I would ask them to come here with their reminiscences of those times. So, over to Professor Michael Michell.
Thank you so much, Professor Datta Roy. Thank you to the whole department, to everybody who's come today to listen. Special thanks to Professor Garg for having facilitated my appearance today. I think I don't want a microphone. I think you'll be able to hear me at the back quite clearly. I hope so. Good. So I want to talk today about my great-great-uncle, S.G. Dunn. There is a portrait of him. There's another one here, a little different, but more or less the same. He was born in 1879 and died in 1964. And first I would like to put the question, what am I actually doing here? Why me? Well, we go back to 1956 and a visit. In 1956, my mother and father took me to a rather dark old house. I remember very well driving up in the dark, and there was a light outside the front door as we came up the drive. One of a number of memories, not very many. I was 6 years old, and I met this old gentleman who was known as the Professor, or Uncle G, for S.G. Dunn, Gerald. But rather nice in Hindi, you say Uncle G, that is a sign of affection, so that applies as well. I have, as I say, a couple of memories. One of them is that he gave me the skin of a bear that he had shot in the Himalayas. The bear skin with the head. And I took it home afterwards and put it on the floor in my bedroom. And I said to my mum the next day, please take it away. I got frightened in the night. The skin, unfortunately, succumbed to the moths. But the head, in a plastic bag, is still on the house. The other memory was of seeing him at the top of the stairs. These are the stairs inside the house. And you can see our little chihuahua puppy or dog there on the stairs. Now, my memory is of Lee standing at the top of the stairs. And I was going to come up, and he said, don't come up. It is unlucky to cross on the stairs. I've never heard this superstition before, and I've never heard it again since. But there we are. Does it come from India? That you don't cross on stairs? I don't think so, because everybody in the station is a bad luck. So that is my memory. It's quite interesting. If I look at it now, I'm too big. It's not right. If I get down to here, where I was at the age of 6, then the perspective is entirely right. So that was my memory of that time, and the family connection is through my mother. My mother was my uncle's favorite niece. In fact, one of the, I think the only descendant from that family. A lot of people didn't have any children, and so that is why my uncle left this house to my mother, and my mother left it to me. It is full of all sorts of Indian things. He had furniture made specially around here, beautiful carved tables, carved chairs, carved bookcases, hundreds of brass ornaments, a tambura, whole lot of stuff. And I've always wondered, how did he get it back to England? What was the trouble? He couldn't put it in a suitcase. So I was amazed to find about 2 weeks ago a negative, and was able to transfer that into a positive, and that is the transport from his home to Circular Road in Allahabad. All of these carts and crates, which were shipped via the railways and the ships back to England. To the house, as I say, where I now live, which is what it looks like now. This is the house that we live in at the moment. Rather lovely. It's a house that has a garden, an orchard, and the field goes down to the river Avon, just outside Stratford from Avon. So there are a lot of Shakespeare there. But in that year, 1956, there was, of course, another visit. And that was the visit of S.G. Dunn back to this university. And you recognize that a photo was taken outside this room. And there it is. Those were the people in 1956 who listened to him talk. He lectured in the history lecture room, which I believe is vast. And he wrote that the room was full and people were standing in the doors and windows. Gave him a standing ovation, which he was very pleased about. The reason he came in 1956, I mentioned in the little video I made that I think some of you have seen on Facebook, that he got a cake from the man who cooked for him while he was in Allahabad, a man called Allahabad Ali. And Allahabad Ali, being a Muslim, had gone to Pakistan after partition, but his property in Allahabad had been confiscated. He had lost everything. And he appealed to my uncle for help. I did say in the video, rather hopefully, that my uncle made some difference, but from the letters that I have looked at since, I see that is not true. The government in Pakistan said this man must be compensated by the government of India. And the government of India said this man must be compensated by the government of Pakistan. And I think that he remained without compensation until the end of his life. There is a picture here of Ali, and one of his letters that he wrote to my uncle. It's a bit difficult to see on here. If I can get it out on my own. We had a technical problem earlier, and my laptop wasn't available. What happened here? It reads, "Dear sir, my joy knows no bounds at the receipt of your kind letter. I pray to God for day and night for your coming here. After my wife and children inquired about you when Saibad were coming in Pakistan, I say he is coming soon." So that is one of the letters that he got. S.G. Dunn arrived in India, in Allahabad, in 1908. He was born, as I said, in 1979 in Gravesend. Gravesend is a part of London now, just outside to the east of London, on the south bank of the Thames. And this house is the house he was born in. It still exists. His sister gave it to the church, and it is now the vicarage of that part of Gravesend. He was educated at Eton and at Jesus College in Oxford. Then he became a school teacher in Wales, in Llandovery College in Wales. And he was also a poet. He wrote poetry. And that was the first time that he became prominent, if you like. He had poems in what is called the National Eisteddfod of Wales, where poetry is celebrated. And as far as I know, he became a bard. It's called chairing the bard. So his poetry is recognized as important there. Then, after Llandovery, he was appointed to Muir Central College in 1908. And here you can see that is the agreement, that is the contract that he got to teach in 1908 in Allahabad. It's a contract, of course, well, I say of course, but you know about colonial times. It's a contract from the government in London. Nobody in Allahabad appointed him. He was appointed in London by the head of the Indian Education Service. And then he went to Allahabad and he wrote a diary of his trip, his first trip to Allahabad. I do the same, by the way. I have a diary here and I've been writing down everything on this trip. I did the same in Caribbean. Quite difficult to read. Oh, we haven't done that. There it is. There's the diary. It's all handwritten. He went, of course, by ship, by Gibraltar, Marseille, Sardinia, Port Said, Suez, and Bombay. He stopped in Bombay to buy some things, and then went on by train to Allahabad. It's quite difficult to read. It took me quite a long time to interpret the writing, to decipher the writing, but I have done it now, so here is some of it. I'm sorry, you probably can't see it too well at the back. I'll read it. November the 22nd, 1980. We passed over a fine bridge over the Jamuna before reaching Allahabad. At the station, the bearer gets out my luggage and the servant from Jennings' side meets me with a note. Drive through endless woods of trees in the dark and turn in at last to a white bungalow with a lamp in the porch. The night watchman is there and opens the door of my bedroom on the right. Bed in center with 4 slender wooden poles to support mosquito net. French windows. Dressing room adjoins with 2 folding doors open and more folding doors to the outside. My bearer wants engaging. Tell him I will see him in the morning. I will see him tomorrow. Weird cries all night from the watchman. When he passes, he coughs to let you know he is awake. The windows are open with net blinds let down, but it seems very easy for anyone to get in. November 23rd. The bungalow stands back well from the road with a wide space all around it. The compound with trees and grass. The road is wide, about 4 times the width of English roads, with trees in double rows on each side and a place for riding between the trees. It extends a long way, but all the houses are hidden in trees. A large park just close. The college is just up the road, a big building of brown and yellow brick and stone with a dome and a high tower. One really might be living in a wood. There are so many trees everywhere. The houses are far apart and hidden in them. The town is some distance away and no one ever goes to it. The shops are bungalows and stand just like the others. No windows flush on the street or anything like ours. Each in their own compound with just a board on the road to distinguish them from private houses. These are, of course, all European. It is called grass-grown Allahabad, and they say that from the town one sees nothing but trees. Saw Jennings at breakfast. His wife is away, and he and I alone with the servants. 2 bearded old men wait on us at table. He seems a good fellow, though like everyone in India has grievances. So that is a 1980 impression of Allahabad. I think it might not be recognizable to him today in that form. And there is a photo. It comes from one of Amarnath Jha's books about the university. Professor Dunn on the left of the picture, and Jennings here is the man in white. So these are all things that we probably heard. The diary goes on, November the 24th. I go into town, into two of my classes. They are large, the first and second year men respectively, some Hindus and some Mohammedans in all sorts of costumes. Jennings introduces me, and one fellow gets up promptly and says, "We are very pleased to see the new professor." Takes us rather aback. They are reading Blackie's Self-Culture and Lyell's Warren Hastings. They just read, and I ask them to explain it to me. They most of them understand it well, and roll out most delicately turned sentences in explanation. This is the elementary work, rather, but I shall be on this for a bit, as they need it. Mine is a new post altogether. Then I take also the third and fourth year in Essays and Unseen English, and finally the fifth and sixth or MA classes in Shakespeare and Milton. That makes 4 hours a day from 10 to 2, which is more than I thought, but apparently it's all right. November 26th. It seems strange to get up every morning with no doubt whatever as to the weather, always fine sunshine. I find India at present very pleasant and am quite fit. Take my MAs this morning in Hamlet and find they know quite a lot about Shakespeare. This afternoon I went for a bike ride down to the port and saw the confluence of the Ganges and Yamuna and the Ashoka pillar. A pillar inscribed with Buddhist edicts set up by King Ashoka in 265 BC. Then along the river, the sun was setting and the water was blood red with it. Several munshis have been round to ask if they may teach me Hindustani, and I have decided on one. I have picked up a few terms already, but not enough. So we can see already at the end of this first week in Allahabad, he begins to learn Hindi, actually Urdu. I think he certainly spoke Urdu because there's something about him talking to a lama in Ladakh, and the translation is Tibetan to Urdu, so he was speaking Urdu at the time. So not just somebody who says you've all got to learn English, as some British people unfortunately do. Of course, we are interested in the centenary, the reorganization of 1922. And so we go back perhaps first to British policies on education in India. Sometimes it is said, the British came and they made everybody learn English. But this wasn't directly true, not at the beginning. It seems that there was a desire to increase the education in India, but first they wanted to keep the same sort of education as before, that is, particularly Sanskrit, which was used for religious texts, and Arabic for the legal texts, because out of the Mughal Empire, the legal language was Arabic. And then, of course, famously, Macaulay wrote his Minute, which has been misrepresented in many ways. It was arrogant. The bit that's always quoted is, "Give me a shelf of European literature is worth more than the whole of what is written in Sanskrit from time of destruction." But he had one or two useful points. One is there was money from the government for education. The government wanted to give this money for Sanskrit and Arabic, but all the students were queuing up to learn English because they knew that the new language of commerce was English. That's what they needed. So Macaulay said, if the students actually want English, we should be supporting that. We shouldn't be paying them to learn what they don't want to learn. So that was the first one. The second was, he made a comparison with the early times in England. In medieval and pre-medieval England, people spoke Anglo-Saxon. But Anglo-Saxon was, if you like, a farming language. It didn't have concepts of philosophy, of knowledge, if you like. So, everybody who wanted an education in those days learned Latin and Greek, and all the old knowledge, which was also partly, by the way, given to us through Arabic, because Arabs had managed to keep that old knowledge in Alexandria and propagate it again, but it was in Greek and in Latin. And people learned that and then transferred that into what was known as the vernacular, which became English from Chaucer onwards. So the idea was that the language of science and the language of commerce, which was European, which was English, should be taught, and then that this could be taught on to students in the vernacular, in the other languages of India. So that was the point about the calling. But of course, university education from then on did develop, particularly in English, although there were Sanskrit universities and universities which were using the vernacular. But the universities were only degree-conferring institutions. They didn't actually teach anybody. You went and you learned something in a college or school, and then you went and had it tested by the university, and if the university accepted it, it gave a degree. That's how it was organized at the time. So, New Central was a teaching college only. The University of Allahabad gave a degree, but Muir College separately was a teaching institution. My uncle proposed changes, and these proposals were published in the Pioneer in 1917. And they were really in four parts. He said, first, we have a problem with teaching because the school teaching isn't good enough. We need to improve school teaching. That was the first one. The second one was we should separate academic ideas from practical ones in universities. They shouldn't be in one place, there shouldn't be one thing. There should be academic universities and technical universities, if you like. Thirdly, he said we should bring together the teaching and the degree giving branches, and we should pool the resources of teaching. So instead of having 5 separate colleges all teaching the same thing with their own staffs, we should put all the teaching together into a faculty, where we can teach everybody, and the students will live in various hospitals, but the teaching will be together. And lastly, that the university should be independent and self-governing. It should have its own institutions which it develops for itself, and they should run the academy in their own way, without outside political or any other influence. So those are the 4 articles, and interestingly enough, that is ahead of what British universities were doing at the time. So this was quite new in some ways. And although it was never officially said, this is almost exactly what happened in 1922 in that reorganization. There was a separation of the interior, that is the institutions in Allahabad. They became one university, and the outside institutions, for example in Agra, became separate. They were hived off and became their own thing. So that was unpopular at the time. Not everybody liked it. That was when the new English department was created in 1922-23, and S.G. Dunn became the first head of that English department. He became the Dean of the Arts Faculty in 1926, and in that year he gave the convocation address, November the 27th, when he was giving the speech to the students departing who had their degrees. A word more about that in a moment. He retired in 1930 and went back to buy a house in Stratford-on-Avon with all those cars and all those bits and pieces. But of course, he is also known still today because of the Dunn Medal. We've got a picture there of one of the Dunn Medals that was won by Julius. In the convocation address, this is something that my friend Professor Harish Trivedi asked me about. He said, where does that Oxford of the East come from? Was it your uncle who started it? So I looked through, I spent 10 days looking through all of the papers I could find, and I never once found that as a remark. It didn't appear at all. In fact, some of the things that he said were quite different. In those articles in 1917, he said, and I quote, "We must shake off the dead hand of the older universities. The last enchantments of the Middle Ages may sound seductively in our ears, but we should not be deaf to the insistent call of the future. Indian conditions must determine the structure of the Indian universities, and the satisfaction of India's real needs in education should be the goal of its endeavors." So, slightly different. Very much, this is what we need in India. Perhaps that is why his name is still held in some esteem and affection here, as I noticed when I came, that he was very much dedicated to India, and not just to the British Raj. He goes on in the convocation address to talk about Carlyle and Carlyle's conception of university. The idea that he's talking about individualism. Individualism. University should just be a collection of books that the individual can go and learn from and become educated. But he says, and I love this sentence, the characteristic of a fallacy is that it looks like a truth until you begin to act on it. As a victim of Brexit in the UK, I feel that sentence. He said a university should be like a republic. It should be like a trade union. It should involve association and cooperation, people working together. It should not be the despotism that we have in a school, where the government tells the head teacher what to do, the head teacher tells the teachers what to do, the teachers tell the students what to do. That's a despotism. University, quite different. It's a place of exchange, but cooperation, association, and strength from that. He said, Allahabad, the unitary residential and teaching university, pooling teaching resources, and guaranteeing freedom for students and teachers, that's the way. He said it's an experiment. Allahabad is an experiment, and as I said, quite a lot of the people that he was talking to didn't like it, particularly the older teachers. They didn't like it. It's revolutionary in some ways. But he said the university should be the leaven that works secretly to make a strong and healthy nation. It should penetrate the whole nation, and it should work secretly to make things better within that nation. Let me quote from the convocation speech. You may look back, and I hope you will as time goes on, with affectionate memory to your undergraduate days here, surrounded by the physical symbols of the university, its buildings and playing fields, perhaps to its professors. Nice little twinkle in the eye. But remember that these outward and visible signs are not the university. It is a spiritual association into which you have entered this day. Throughout your lives, the real university is with you, unseen. Those fellow members of it are with you to help you or to receive your help. Give to this university each day some portion of your thoughts, your prayers, if you use that word, for the messages which you send out into the spiritual ether, and then will this university be a real power for good in the land, Allahabad, the city of God. The University of Allahabad has won an honourable name among the universities of India throughout the world. We of Allahabad need to be in the front line and keep that line steadily advancing. So, different from Oxford in the East. Students and colleagues certainly were affectionate towards him. Poor Mr. Gopal here missed him. I can't read it there, skip over it, because he was ill 1911 to 12, and he was supposed to come and didn't come. Mr. Gopal went to the station and was absolutely upset that he didn't come. Several letters from Mr. Gopal, who unfortunately failed his exams and never completed his university education. Other people, of course, became quite famous. One of his colleagues was Amarnath Jha. First of all, however, his father was a colleague, Gaganath Jha. Was a teacher at the same time as my uncle. Amarnath Jha, you can see here a signed photograph, your friend and pupil, Amarnath Jha. He referred to my uncle sometimes as his guru. And he came and visited my uncle in that house in Stratford-on-Avon, and it really brought him very close, because the cedar tree is still there, and my uncle wrote in his tribute to Amarnath Jha after his death how they sat under the cedar tree and discussed Tilak's theory together one June evening on the lawn under the cedar in Alston. And I've sat there, of course, often. So now I will think of them both sitting there in the sun. And of course, he was also a colleague of Michell, who you will all know as a poet, not only as a poet, but as the father of one of the great Hollywood stars. And S.C. Dent was the head of the department in 1956 when he returned. He was a man with multiple interests. I've already said he was a poet. He was also a playwright. Interestingly enough, he wrote 2 plays on the ship on the way in 1908, which they performed on the ship, he and some of the fellow passengers. He also wrote a sketch for the grand pageant held in 1911 as part of the great Allahabad exhibition. He wrote a play for that, a historical play. He also had plays performed in London, but he was never great. A mountaineer. He climbed in the Himalayas. He was part of the survey that established the border region between India and Russia, and he climbed some of the high peaks up there. He was a wrestler. Every morning he used to go and take part in Indian wrestling, and he has some articles about the moves in Indian wrestling and what particular moves are called, and some photographs of the wrestlers. He was a military observer. In 1918 he was seconded into the army when the British Army was in Iraq. At the end of the First World War, he travelled to Baghdad, Tehran, Mosul as what was called an eyewitness. He was then also an observer in the Third Afghan War. He described sitting in the passenger seat of a jeep with a little round hole in the windscreen where the previous occupant had been shot. So he did some quite adventurous things. He was a book collector. He loved collecting books. He took catalogues with him to buy different books. He was in a remote valley in Kashmir when he saw an advertisement for a first edition of John Donne's sermons going for 7 and 6pence. So he sent off, he said, I knew I wouldn't be successful because it would take too long from the time of the catalogue until he gets the telegram to London. So he sent the telegram off, and he got a telegram back, we're sorry, this has been sold. But we have another copy, another first edition of John Donne's sermons. Unfortunately, we can sell it to you for 7 shillings and 6pence, but unfortunately, someone has scribbled all over it. If you don't mind the scribbles, then you can buy it. So he bought it, and then noticed that the scribbles were signed S.T.C., Samuel Taylor Coleridge. They were Coleridge's notes in the sermons of John Donne. The book is now in the library, Bodleian Library in Oxford, and is a particularly brilliant example. So, wonderful, sorry, it's got scribbles. Yeah, I love it. He was an author of school books, you'll see him around. He was a marksman and a hunter. He shot animals in the hills. Although he had mixed feelings about shooting animals, but he was persuaded that you had to cull some of the animals in order to preserve the ecosystem of Pakistan. He was in Pakistan, and those horns are on the wall of my house. He was a traveller. He travelled all over the world, all sorts of different places. He was an aviator. He belonged to the aeroplane club of Allahabad. He was a married man in retirement, which is, of course, how I knew him. The aviator, the traveller, very interesting piece I found about his journey by air from England to India. In 1929, it was about 3 months after that service was established by Imperial Airways, and it took 11 days. 11 days to travel from England to India by air, including 3 days in Baghdad when they got stuck in a sandstorm and they had to stay in a house with no furniture or mosquito nets and very little food, which he wasn't very keen on. And then they tried to start off in the sandstorm, but the pilot lost his way. My uncle said, I think he's going the wrong way. He's going up the river and he's going down. And the pilot noticed later and found a railway line to go back to Baghdad to follow. He left the aeroplane in Karachi and went on from there by rail, I think, breathing a sigh of relief. His books. There was volume of poetry, The Treasure of the Sea, 1906. In 1929, he produced the volume Without Prejudice, which is a collection of essays and poems, and I read one of the poems in my little video, India. Then he wrote In England, What It's Like in England, and it's a bit like, if you are an expat teacher like me, you have kind of nostalgia about your own country and you romanticize it. So, romanticized view of England for Indian students. That's what it was. I don't know if there's a copy in your library. A first book of Indian history. I couldn't even find that on the internet. Nobody has heard of it before, but I have it. I've scanned it. First book of Indian history, 1914, again for schools. Interestingly enough, when I was in Bhattacharya Sikri, the guide, more or less word for word, repeated what was in that first book of Indian history when talking about Akbar and his successors and predecessors. School editions of Wordsworth, Coleridge, Tennyson, Stevenson, Scott, and Reed, plus an edition of essays, selected essays with introductions which was co-written with Renata Jack. Quite productive. He wrote a paper called The Value of the Study of English Literature. That's of interest to us. Main points, not just English, any literature. He said it's an alternative to vicarious entertainment. In those days, of course, it was cinema. Cinema he was going again. Now, of course, it would be the screen, the whole time the screen. Yeah? It's an alternative. It has a practical value because it trains discernment, being able to see the difference between what is rubbish and what is worth. Discernment. It particularly teaches the use of techniques to recognize rhetorical tricks and manipulation. Oh, we see that so much nowadays, don't we? Rhetorical tricks and manipulation. I come back to Brexit. I won't mention other countries, but in Britain, we certainly have suffered from that. But for me, the most important thing was he met in the Lake District a worker who would come up for the weekend into the hills, and he quoted lines by Wordsworth. And the man then said, before I read that, I never knew there was such language nor such things to be seen. It was like as if I'd been walking over a dull plain and come out suddenly on the top of a hill and saw a wide country, all beautiful in the sunshine, stretched out before me for miles and miles. And to be able to give that richness to somebody, that must be worth something, I think. And I would indeed experience, because when I was at school, I had a revelatory and inspiring teacher in the 1960s. Really, so what started it off for me was his introduction of Dylan Thomas, the poetry of Dylan Thomas. And my world suddenly was not only turned over, but overnight. Unforgettable. And so many people that just hasn't happened. And I think, what would I have lost if I never had that extraordinary thing? Well, I studied languages. I didn't actually study English, except that the languages also involved the study of English. So I studied at Cambridge. I studied French and German. And then I became a teacher of English as a foreign language in an international school in Folkestone in the UK. And then I went on to become a teacher at a German gymnasium. The gymnasium is the high school. So pupils from 11 to 19. And in Germany, of course, there are a number of similarities with the situation in India. It's a language where quite a lot of people say, oh, they shouldn't be learning English, they should be learning German. What's going to happen to our German culture if we have all these people who are learning English? There's a danger to our culture for all of this. So you notice there are similar things, but of course it's not true. You can have both. You don't have to choose. You don't have to say either you must learn Urdu, Hindi, and so on, or you must learn. Of course not. Why shouldn't we be bilingual, multilingual, multicultural? Just as I am now, I have a German wife, I have bilingual children, and all the better for it. But my teaching was teaching a living language and living literature. When I first went, there was quite a lot of translation teaching, there was quite a lot of teaching in German, and I taught in English all the time, from beginners onwards. I brought a bag of things, and we would start, this is the bus, give the bus to so and so. And you actually have the things there, it's all hands on, it all becomes a living entity, and very quickly the kids will start learning English alive, and they won't have to translate. They'll learn to think in the other language. And when you begin to think in the other language, and even dream in the other language, then you are getting close to bilingualism, and you are able to use English in fantastic ways. Like I saw at the end of the Jaipur Festival, there was a big debate that they often have on the last day, and it was amazing. The fluency, the erudition of the speakers, the intricacy of the debate, and I thought, okay, if my other had something to do with people being able to do this in the English language, this is fine. I don't think I would hear such a good debate in English. I don't think so. I was also teaching living literature. One of the ways you can do that is drama. So one thing I did quite early on, when I was teaching Shakespeare, we would put it on the stage. We would put a scene on the stage. Somebody came from the government to see what I was doing and said, I have never seen that before. Hasn't been done before. Now it's quite common. This was back in the 1980s. But it was new then. And suddenly it takes on quite different feeling. You can suddenly get much closer to the language. So I started a drama group, the English drama group. It's called. We put on plays every year, and they were in the original, not adapted, not shortened. I started off with The Wild as Our Town, and we went on to some of Beckett, Waiting for Godot, and the third one was Richard III, Shakespeare, and I thought if we could do this, we could do anything. And we did. We went on with all sorts of things. If you come to my talk on Thursday, I will say a little bit about the genesis of my own book, my own research in a production of Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, which was done by the group. So that is living teaching, in my opinion. And then I wrote books for German schools, just as my uncle wrote books for Indian schools. This is one of them, the post-colonial experience. It was extracts from important post-colonial works with explanations, questions, and a teacher's book with a whole load of interesting information about the authors and their works. Can't really see it from there, but if anybody is interested, they can look at it in more detail. And I will leave a slideshow with the departments so that people can have a look at it. I also did a book called Ethnic Diversity in the UK, which involves the diaspora, for example, from the Caribbean, from India, from Africa, who have now come to the UK and made the UK a very multicultural place. Many of you, I'm sure, will know that. So you get people like the Nobel laureate Abdul Luna, who came from Zanzibar originally, but there are a lot of others as well. And finally, Shakespeare. I did something on Shakespeare. One of the things about Shakespeare that I like to teach is the prologue from Henry V. I don't know if you know that. A lot of people don't do Shakespeare's histories. Now, this is a prejudice. A lot of people think, well, it's nothing to do with anybody else in the world. A whole lot of medieval English history. What's it got to do with anything? Leave it out. We'll all go to Hamlet, we'll all go to Macbeth, we'll all go to something. Rubbish. This is about power. All of the history plays are about the nature, the abuse, and use of power. And that is extremely interesting what Shakespeare has to say about it. It's also interesting, but it's a very important concept in Shakespeare of everything and nothing. Everything and nothing. It begins, oh, for the news of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling sea. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashing like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. Now it's interesting to begins with that oh! Of course, it's a good start, it's a good loud sound. Oh! But it is also a no. It's a nothing. It's nothing. For a muse of fire, the idea of a muse, you have to, kids don't understand what muses are. What I used to do is, some of you may know Simon Garfunkel. Simon Garfunkel sang a song called Cecilia. It's a very weird song. If you ask him what's happening with Cecilia, he gets up in the morning, when he comes back to bed, she's not there. Or somebody's taking my place. Somebody else is really good. And this is the prostitute or what? No, Cecilia, of course, is the patron saint of music. Cecilia is the muse. Cecilia is somebody who is there to inspire you, and somebody is gone. And you can't write anything anymore. And always, you need often to introduce these old concepts in new ways and make them come alive. So over a muse fire, water, fire, and air. Fire is the one that goes up. The four elements. That would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. So it's what we should have, the best thing we should have, is the real kingdom for the stage. Absolute realism. Absolute realism. You really have King Henry there. You really have the armies. The whole lot is really there. Because now, with CGI, we can pretend we've got that. We've got Lord of the Rings or something. And it gives us this illusion anyway, right? So the real thing would be what we really need. And then he says, then would the warlike Harry assume the port of Mars. He would be like the god Mars. So suddenly we've got the real, but we've now converted it into the god. Funnily enough, really odd. But pardon gentles all the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the lasty fields of France, or maybe cram within this wooden O the very casks that did affright the air at Agincourt? Within the O, can we do this? Can we put everything, the whole of that world, into nothing? The wooden O, which is of course the Globe Theatre. The Globe Theatre is a wooden O, it's a nothing which contains the whole world. And he goes on, O pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little less than million. Most people don't understand that, even productions leave it out. A crooked figure may attest in little place a million. What he means is, if we've got nothing, we've got nothing. Put another one next to it, we've got nothing. Put another one next to it, we've got nothing. Nothing plus nothing plus nothing. Let's put 6 together. Nothing, 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 nothing. Put a crooked figure in front of it, a 1, it becomes a million. The crooked figure is the actor, and he can create a whole world. Wow. Let us cipher to this great account on your imaginary forces. The imagination is one. And to release the power of the imagination, that's what we do as teachers, I think. Right? To inspire revelation. Okay, I went on to do an external PhD under the scholar and author David Davide. I wrote a book called Hidden Mutualities, which I'm going to say more about next time. I got contact with a lot of Caribbean writers, in particular Derek Walcott and Wilson Harris. Wilson Harris was a very close dear friend, and You may not know the novels of Wilson Harris. He was, by the way, a friend of Roger Brown's. But he is very well worth reading. Not easy reading, but extraordinary. And I taught English at the University of Allahabad in Germany. And I now work with the Amina Gafoor Institute for the Study of Indenture and its legacies, all about how after slavery, at the end of slavery, the British government abolished slavery. I don't know if you know this. They abolished slavery, but they raised more money than has ever been raised before by a government to compensate the slave owners. Slaves never got paid. The slave owners got massive sums. And they used some of that money to import labor from India under a system called indenture. That is why in Mauritius and South Africa, in the Caribbean, in Trinidad, and Guyana, there are large Indian populations. So that is one of the things that we are studying and teaching about at the moment. A particular branch of postcolonial literature. The advantages of my sort of career, which I would characterize as idiosyncratic, I did not go through the normal channels. I did not come up through the university. It's always from the side. There has a lot of advantages. It's the ability to work outside structures, cross-disciplinary work, which also means cross-fertilization, the chance to innovate, the chance to work outside established ways of thinking, and independent from hierarchies. And one of the things that I did as a result of that was I used a lot of the ideas of C.G. Jung, which I got interested in at an early age. C.G. Jung is not so well known in the normal teaching of literature or study of literature. Of course, Jung and Freud are often paired, or rather seen as contrasts. And Freud, unfortunately, always had the advantage there. And everybody said, yeah, we need to know about Freud, but Jung's no such as Freud. Jung, however, has always been of interest to writers. Almost every writer that I have met has been interested in the ideas of Jung, including Wilson Harris. And I just want to talk about one thing of Jung. We're nearly at the end. Synchronicity. Not everybody knows this concept. Synchronicity. Jung started off from the strange fact that there are often meaningful coincidences. Meaningful coincidences. Little things like, you're thinking about somebody and they ring up that number. A lot of things that happen to everybody. And usually we dismiss them because we say, thinking that is anything serious, that must be superstition. Well, Jung said perhaps it isn't. Perhaps it isn't superstition. Perhaps it's important. And with the physicist, Wolfgang Pauli, of course, was one of the founders of quantum physics. Wolfgang Pauli was a friend of yours. And together they suggested an interesting possibility of the way in which the universe works. They said, the universe as we often see it consists of two important things. There is the space-time continuum, material, if you like, of the universe, and there is indestructible energy. And these two things are connected by causality. Cause and effect. It's what people study at science. I know that all of you are suffering from the fact that all the Indians want to study science. So, that is the world as we normally see it. But Jung said the psyche is often like that. We have two neutral elements, we have one dominant element. In this case, causality. But underneath, in the unconscious, there is another thing. There needs to be a quaternity, like Taj Mahal, four everywhere, the rivers of paradise and so on. There needs to be four, the number. What is the fourth? The fourth, Jung suggested, could be meaningful coincidence, connection by meaning, what he called an a-causal connecting principle. And he named it synchronicity. And synchronicity is related, in my opinion, to things like metaphor. And therefore, one of the important things that we study when we study literature. And I'd like to close with a lovely case of synchronicity. Because in 1937, Amarnath Jha made the decision to give honorary doctorates. One of the honorary doctorates was given to my uncle. He became a doctor of letters in 1938, and the other at the same time was C.G. Jung, who got an honorary doctorate from this university on the same day. Neither of them were there. Jung didn't like India very much, so they were Freudians. And my uncle didn't come, it was too long ago. He came in 1956, but not that. So there we are, that was the first talk. And sorry, I've gone on a bit, and I hope that you found it interesting. If you have any questions, we haven't got much time. But it would be delightful if you have, or come and chat to me afterwards. I'm around, as you probably know, until the end of the week. And I would love to talk to anybody who is interested in any of these subjects or would like to know more about it. And as I said, most of this material will be going to the English department so that you will be able to look at it, including some of the scans of my uncle's books and papers that I've made so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Michell, for your enlightening and fascinating address. We are today enriched by your words, sir. All the beaming faces in this hall can see the past coming alive before us. These pictures and presentation have given us a panoramic glimpse of the glorious past and time and about life and experiences of Professor Jha, and have indeed given us a feeling of deja vu. And now I request again our head, Professor S.D. Roy, to come and present bouquet to our guest. What better way to express our love to sir than ours? Please, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Today we have amongst us our senior retired professors, the visionaries and erudites like Professor H.S. Saxena, Professor J.P. Munshresh, who have contributed in making this department an intellectually rich and culturally vibrant place. I would humbly like to request them to come, reminisce their splendid days in the department, take a walk down the memory lane, and share their experiences.
Room would have heard Professor S.T. Jha. If you look around at the walls, the ceiling and the floors, how many voices does this room remember? Motilal Nehru, Tej Bahadur Sabha, Amarnath Jha, S.T. Jha. And this is where the great Friday club meetings were held. This is a legendary room, and it is our privilege that we could add to the legendary narrative of this room. How can we ever thank Michael for coming at his own cost to Allahabad? It's been my good fortune that I made the acquaintance of Professor Michell, and I thank him on behalf of the department for adding to our treasury of memories, for memorializing a past we have lost touch with, and we need the leaving of such anecdotes, such memories to breathe fresh life into the continuing story of the Allahabad University. Thank you.
to invite Professor Sarjeet Mukherjee to propose a vote of thanks. So, please.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the Department of English, our head of the department, Professor Sanjay Roy, and on my own behalf, I thank all of you for being here today. 1922 was a record-marking year, the year when the modernist period was at its peak, the year of wasteland, the year of Jacob Bloom, the year of Ulysses, and also the year of the inception of this department. So it is a great privilege that we, in another 100 years, have somebody here today who can tell us about the man and review of those person who started this department and made its foundation. I'm particularly grateful to my teachers here today, Professor Michell, Professor Kulsresh, Professor K.T. Srivastava, Professor N. Trivedi, Professor Allahabad, I would like probably Professor there, Professor Aileen Das, and Professor Neelam Saratgor for being here today. This brings us back to our days when we used to sit spellbound listening to our teachers. Whatever we are today is what they have given us. I thank everyone who has made it possible for Professor Michell to be with us here today, Professor Vandana Sharma, Professor Neelam Saratgor, and Professor Sanjay Roy, who have given us this moment, which is going to be treasure house of memories and remembrances for us for the years to come. I thank all the members of the organizing committee for taking on this task of holding this function. Special thanks go to Professor Jaya Kapoor, Dr. Vivek Dwivedi, Dr. Salim Siddiqui, Dr. Shivanur Rahman, Dr. Amarnath, Dr. Pramod Kumar Kumar, Dr. Satish Prajapati, Dr. Umesh, Dr. Papia Dani, and all the other members of the department. We are thankful to all the staff and helpers of the department for their wholehearted support in organizing the program led by our minister, Ram Sajiman and his team, and Mr. Qasim, the SVT, and the ever enthusiastic Saurabh. Thank you all. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Professor Mukherjee. And this brings us to the end of this event. I request our guests to join us at the library for the refreshments. Research scholars are advised to stay back.